Hi, I'm Amy Finley, and this is Across the Fence. We're recording this in mid-August, which means we have successfully bypassed a day that will live on in Vermont infamy, July 10th. Unbelievably, on July 10th, 2023, and then again on July 10th, 2024, parts of Vermont experienced catastrophic flooding. Last year, our show with these same guests on this same topic was actually preempted by this station's up-to-the-minute coverage of the 2024 floods. This year, heavy rains caused flooding in a few Northeast Kingdom towns on July 10th. But we've come out on the other side, and the flooding danger for 2025 appears to be behind us. Nonetheless, having learned from the past, Vermont stands ready. After the 2023 disaster, the Vermont Agricultural Task Force was formed. Today, I'm talking with two members of that task force about what they've learned and what the task force is up to now. Nicole Dubuque is the Chief Operations Officer for the Vermont Agency of Agriculture, Food, and Markets. And next to her is the Director of UVM Extension and Associate Dean of UVM's College of Agriculture and Life Sciences, Roy Beckford. Welcome.
Thank you.
So no one here is a meteorologist, but when each of you saw rain predicted for July 10th again this year in the Northeast Kingdom, did you sort of have that, oh my gosh, deja vu all over again feeling?
For
Yes.
sure.
Absolutely.
I mean, I know I did. Yeah.
Absolutely.
I'm not going to
Yeah.
lie about that.
Yeah. Well, I mean, how did it feel? How did it strike you to hear that again?
It's interesting because July 13 is my birthday.
Oh, you're kidding.
And so for the last couple of years, I've lived on the edge,
On
is
the
this going
edge.
to really mess up my birthday celebrations?
Absolutely.
This year, I actually took vacation around that time. So I was actually away, but keeping an ear open about what's going on in Vermont.
Well,
Going
possibly because having gone through this again in 24, you knew now how well prepared the
Yeah.
state was to handle, right?
Yeah.
Okay. So the initial damage from the flood is one thing, but as we've learned, and for that matter, as the name of the task force alludes to, recovery is what takes both the most time and, of course, the most money. Are recovery efforts still in effect for the flooding of 23 and 24?
Yes, there's still recovery efforts in effect. As you could probably imagine, with infrastructure projects, they can take a long time. And processing applications through the federal programs can also take a fair amount of time when it comes to what they have to do as far as, submitting receipts and doing all of that. So yes, those things are still very much going on. There are also some federal programs in the works to provide more resources to states for recovery, specifically for the events of those 2 years.
The other part of that of recovery is the farmer's economic recovery. So something happens last year, it takes time to get back on track economically this year. So
Absolutely. Okay, so Nicole, the report that was published after the 23 floods, and in that there was some polling numbers from farmers, and about 56% of them said that they expected they would experience negative cash flows in 2024. Did things turn out as bad as was predicted? And of course, we had flooding again in 2024.
Yeah, I don't have exact numbers on that. I would say that with the philanthropic efforts we saw in the state, as well as the BGAP program, the Business Emergency Gap Assistance Program that we were able to set up on state level, I think we were able to help a lot of those people. So I'm hoping that it was lower numbers than the 56%. We definitely lost farms, that's for sure. But I feel good that I don't feel like it was as bad as it could have been.
That's great. So that's a tiny silver lining right there.
Yes.
Yeah. Roy, in that same report, the task force also reported that there was a gap in farmers holding adequate crop insurance. And that gap repeated again after the 24 flooding. Another common theme was that farmers found that the insurance that they did have didn't necessarily cover all of their losses. Is this still the case, or have changes been made to policies?
So this question will take a while to kind of unravel, but the thing about policy federally is that it takes a long time. For example, the Farm Bill We have not had a new farm bill
still
in
have no
several
farm
years.
bill, right.
So unpack that for a minute. You realize that it's difficult. The other thing about policy is it's hard. Even at the state level, it's difficult. But there are a number of things that were put in place to address the issues. The state, for example, some of the recommendations we made at the task force eventually resulted in the emergence of bills. S60 was one of those. And those have attempted to kind of fill that gap, providing emergency funding. While that is not fully resolved, that was an attempt to deal with the gap issue.
Absolutely. Okay. Well, so ironically, or maybe presciently, one of the big takeaways from the post-23 Vermont Agricultural Recovery Task Force was the need to develop this. We needed to develop more resiliency for future events. So how was the 24 response better because of what we had experienced, what you had put into place in 23?
I think a great thing that happened is that we had a task force that was ready.
Yeah.
A task force that was actually very practiced, and it was already there, and the memory was recent. So we kind of jumped into action and basically just applied some of the conditions and that we had applied the year before.
Yeah.
So that really helped us. We also developed a toolkit that kind of provided resources so that farmers could easily see where they could apply for funds, who they could reach out to, what federal and state agencies they could call on. It made it much easier in 24 as a consequence of what happened in 23 and how well prepared we were as a task force.
Well, because you weren't starting from scratch anymore.
Absolutely.
You weren't responding to like this for the very first time. You'd already put some of these systems in place. You had the right people. You knew what kind of response was going to be needed, right?
Yeah. And I think we should give credit to the farmers too, right? So we had the task force. Of course, we could be proactive, say we've got this forecast coming. What are we going to do?
Right.
But in situations where producers were out there knowing like this is coming and there's nothing I can do to prevent it if it hits my field, but they knew what they would need to apply for those federal programs. They knew like you're going to need to take the pictures, you're going to need to contact your local FSA office. So I think that was also really helpful.
Yeah. Well, okay, so then this year when there's the forecast for some flooding events in the Northeast Kingdom, how did all of that come into play in 25? How were they better prepared?
Yeah, I mean, I think we had boots on the ground, so to speak, right?
Yeah.
We had people in my agency, and I'm sure in Roy's as well, calling farmers in those affected areas and saying, like, this is coming, or after it came even, you know, our secretary at the Agency of Agriculture was calling farmers and saying, like, how'd you fare? Are you okay? What do you need? So, yeah.
I mean, not to be flip, but it's a little like the bat signal can be turned on now.
Yeah.
You know, I mean, we have an alert system, like people have been put into place. We know better now how to respond, and those relationships have been built.
Right.
So what's happening now? Because, I mean, you know, we're in an era of climate change. You know, we're sort of getting the sense of the fact that all these dress rehearsals are something that is going to continue. So
I think what's happening now is awareness. People are aware that this can happen, that disasters do happen, and they're happening more regularly, not just in the state of Vermont, but around the country.
Right.
A couple of things that have emerged is that other folks in other states are becoming aware of the work that we have done, that we have sustained the presence of the task force, and they're calling on us to ask us how we did it. You know, what are the best practices? That's happening now, and I think the lessons learned in Vermont is certainly having an impact on other places, and people are calling us to provide some insight into how we did it.
Is there one top-level learning that you find is the most important, or that you do communicate with other states?
Yeah, continuity and an understanding of where the resources are, and just the fact that our farmers need to be educated around preparedness, response, mitigation, who to call on.
Right. Yeah. Resiliency. How do you build resiliency? And I think actually we were speaking a little bit beforehand, and we know that resiliency, you know, that there's financial aspects to that, environmental, but you also talked about like emotional resiliency, how the farmers felt. How are the farmers doing?
That's hard to answer. Farmers lose, they lose equipment, they lose farmland because of all the things that happen. They lose things. I mean, and when you lose property and when you lose people, when you can't have the access,
workers,
absolutely, then it impacts farmers in very negative ways. So it's very, very hard to answer that one. Some farmers are doing well. Some other farmers have needed resources, and we've tried to do that too through the task force, is to provide some kind of answers and give them ideas of where to go to look for those resources.
Yep. Okay. So actually, Roy, then thinking too about UVM's land grant mission, is there an example you can point to about how UVM Extension has helped farmers in the aftermath of the floods? I
think there are many examples, not just one. Our extension faculty and staff are out there, and they're sometimes the first responders, so to speak. They're called upon quickly. They do assessments of damage. They help farmers take pictures, just dealing with the sort of losses. We also conduct, in 23, we conducted soil tests that helped farmer prepare for the aftermath. And as well, they help with providing data to the task force and to other agencies that need all of that. And technical assistance all around as farmers kind of come back and try to reconvene after the events.
So Nicole, you work for the state. So how is communication between Vermont officials key to helping farmers and Vermonters when we're affected by natural disasters?
It's so important. So I think that's why the task force worked, right? It's because we had the subject matter experts at the table who were out there listening to producers and
it's been
bringing,
so important.
And bringing that feedback.
Absolutely.
And we also had our federal partners at the table. We made sure to have NRCS and other branches of USDA at the table with us, talking about what programs they already have available, how could they provide resources out there.
So important.
And the congressional delegation, right? Like
we have to
work in Washington too and talk about what resources Vermont needs, and that was big for us.
For resources regarding flood in Vermont, visit the Vermont Agency of Agriculture website. The address is on the screen, agriculture.vermont.gov/flood. There you'll find contact information and you can read all the Ag Task Force published reports. Roy and Nicole, I want to thank you for being here with me today. It's been wonderful to have a chance to talk more about Vermont's resiliency and what we have learned from all of the flood response and recovery. Also, no offense, but I do hope that we are never here again having this same conversation. Thank you, Vermont, for learning and exploring with me today. And thanks to the team that makes Across the Fence possible. I'm Amy Finley. This is Across the Fence. Come back and let's learn and explore together again tomorrow.